welcome back to On the Fly. Today we're taking a look at Day 6 of the World Junior Championship, currently happening in Halifax and Moncton. So hopping right onto it with the scores from today's games. We'll start off with a 4-3 victory for Switzerland over Slovakia in a shootout. And in this game, it was a very good game overall. We had a comeback, 3-1 for Switzerland, coming back and winning. And it was a very evenly matched game for the most part. I thought Slovakia definitely had the edge in the game, although they sort of lost it towards the end, obviously with momentum starting to stack against them. But at the end of the day, Slovakia looked pretty good, and I think there's no reason why they should be panicking after this loss. Unfortunately for them, this game did actually matter. In terms of Switzerland, as soon as the game went to overtime, it did not matter. So we sort of saw that towards the end of the shootout, where they're having a lot more fun with their moves, and where Slovakia was a lot more panicked. They needed the win to get the second spot, not having to play Canada. But at the end of the day, in terms of what Switzerland and Slovakia did, Slovakia played good. And I thought Switzerland looked good towards the end. If they can bring that sort of effort through all 60 minutes, they have a better shot at winning. And I think when we look at Switzerland as a whole, we've seen them. They've always played better in overtime. They've played better towards the end of the game. They have 3 overtime/shootout wins this tournament. So the more they can play earlier in the game, I think the better. Switzerland, as soon as you get to overtime or a shootout, though, be careful. They've had plenty of practice where a lot of the other teams haven't. So that's definitely something to pay attention to. And sort of that's all you can really take from this game. Switzerland played well towards the end. Slovakia started really well, sort of faded at the end. So with that being said, that's your final 4-3 for Switzerland in a shootout. Taking a look at the second game of the day, 8-1 for the Czechs over Germany. This game really was reflective of the score, 8-1 for the Czechs. And in terms of what Germany's looking at in terms of the quarterfinals, that's a match with the US, and that's going to be extremely tough, more tough than the Czechs. I don't think that they're going to have high expectations going in. I think making it to the quarters, not getting relegated, not being in the relegation playoffs is good. I think that's sort of where they want it to be, especially as tight as this tournament has been. I don't really see Germany doing too much, although they have held Sweden 1-0. So if they can do that with the US, they have a shot. If their goaltender can stand on his head, they have a shot. But at the end of the day, they need to figure it out. They need to reach a new level where they're not necessarily going to be playing to their Germany standards if they want any shot at beating the US. As for the Czechs, they looked pretty good. Winning the top spot in Group A, I think it's definitely a step in the right direction for them. And they get to play the Swiss. So with that being said, a good game for the Czechs, a good matchup for the Czechs. We'll see if they can continue their streak and beat the Swiss, making it to the semifinals. It's going to be interesting to see what goes on there, because then the winner of that will play the Finns and the Swedes. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what goes on there. But with that being said, we'll move along here to the third game of the day. And this game was one of the most interesting games of the day. We have US beating Finland 6-2. And in this game, the score, in my opinion, reflects the game for the most part. I think it could have even been a higher score for the US. The US looked really good overall, definitely bringing some momentum into their matchup against Germany. And as for the Finns, they looked really, really bad. And they haven't looked great all tournament, I'll give them that. But they also haven't played very good competition all tournament. And I think as soon as Finland played some good competition, like the US, that's when everything fell apart. And I am definitely concerned for Finland this year. I don't really see them playing too well against a team like the Swedes, where you're going to be facing that higher end competition. So it's going to be interesting to see where that matchup goes. Obviously, Finland-Sweden is always a great matchup. So it's going to be interesting to see what goes on there. But with that being said, I'm going to the fourth game of the day, with Canada beating Sweden 5-1. This game, relatively reflective of the score. Canada looked really good. And aside from some penalties, some discipline issues, which they've had all tournament, you've had two 5-minute penalties so far. You've had a 5-on-3 in that last game, and plenty of other penalties. Canada needs to clean up their game a little bit there. If they can, there's no reason why they can't go extremely far in this tournament. As for Sweden, they got to start to capitalize on their chances. They're extremely skilled as a team. They can start finishing those 5-on-3s, those 5-minute power plays. Then they have a shot, especially against a team like the Finns, where they're not going to give you a lot, but when they do give you something, you got to capitalize on it. That's where I think Sweden has to improve. Canada also has to improve in their discipline, and that's really the main takeaways from that last game. But with that, we'll move along to the final standings of the World Junior Championship, with starting off in Group A with the Czechs in first, 10 points, Canada in second with 9, you have Sweden in third with 8 points, Germany in fourth place with 3 points, and Austria in last place with 0 points. There, Austria is going to be playing in the relegation tournament for the first time since the COVID pandemic. Obviously, with the COVID, they have not had any relegation due to travel restrictions, travel issues. So this is going to be the first time, going to be an exciting time for sure. Definitely looking forward to it. And as we look here down to Group B, we have the U.S. in first place with 9, Finland with 8 in second. You have Slovakia you have Slovakia in third with 8 points. Finland has the tiebreaker over Slovakia as they beat them. Fourth place, we have Switzerland with 6 points, and in last place in the relegation spot, we have Latvia with 1 point. Taking a look at the upcoming schedule for January 2nd, not today, January 2nd, that's Monday, January 2nd, starting off at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will have Latvia playing Austria in the relegation first game. Remember, that's the best 2 of 3 series, so the winner of that will stay in the tournament for next year. The loser will be kicked out of the tournament with the new team coming in. Definitely interesting to see that. First time we've seen it since COVID, as I mentioned. I think this is going to be a good relegation series, at least for the most part, as these teams are relatively evenly matched. I think the big issue for both these teams so far, this tournament at least, has been their lack of production. They've had plenty of high-scoring opportunities, but they just have not been able to capitalize on them. So if they can capitalize, I think that's going to be the determiner of what goes on in this series. The more teams that can capitalize on the other team's mistakes and getting chances of their own, I think at the end of the day is going to win this. And I think that's going to be Latvia. I'm going to predict Latvia in 2, but at the same time, you never know. Austria has proven themselves to play well. That game against Germany, where there's a little bit lesser competition, I think Latvia and Austria are probably the 2 worst teams on paper right now, at least. So it's going to be interesting to see what goes on there. At the end of the day, these 2 teams are going to be playing for their tournament dreams, so anything can happen in this. Desperation will kick in, and I am looking forward to seeing what goes on there. But we'll take a look at the second game of the day, coming up at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time between Finland and Sweden. So this is going to be a great matchup. Definitely must watch. Always a good time whenever we see Finland and Sweden play in the quarters. Typically we see them play a little bit later, semifinals, finals for these 2 teams, but this year it's in the quarters. A lot of fun matchups coming up. So definitely stay tuned. In my opinion, that's probably the game of the day between Finland and Sweden. And we'll take a look moving ahead here. 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have Switzerland and the Czechs. This is going to be a great game as well. In my opinion, I got to give it to the Czechs. The way they've looked in this tournament so far has been really good, in my opinion. But at the same time, with the Swiss, they've shown that they've won 3 games this tournament. All in overtime, all in shootout, sure. But at the end of the day, a win's a win. So we'll see if they're able to definitely capitalize on some of the Czechs' mistakes. Because for the most part, the Czechs have cruised through this tournament. They've outplayed every team they've had so far. They've outplayed Canada when they played Canada. They outplayed Sweden, although they did lose. But they still outplayed them in overtime. So with that being said, it's definitely a toss-up game. I'm looking forward to seeing what goes on there. We'll move along here to the 4 o'clock game, U.S.-Germany. I think this is probably going to be the least competitive game of the day. In my opinion, this is probably going to be 11-1, 12-1, 13-1. And just the way Germany's set up, they play a skilled game, but when they play more skilled teams, they have trouble. And we've seen that throughout this tournament with Canada, where they beat them 11-1, with the Czechs, where they beat them 8-1. Not necessarily with Sweden, because their goaltender stood on their head that game. But at the end of the day, Germany, unfortunately, is not looking that good when they play the U.S. But it's definitely be interesting to see. You never know. As I mentioned, miracles happen in this tournament. So with that being said, we move on to the 4th game of the day, between Canada and Slovakia, coming your way at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And be sure to check back in, as we will be having our live reaction on the channel, so be sure to check in. So that's 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as Canada takes on Slovakia. Definitely one to watch, and be sure to check back in. Coming live on this channel, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But we'll take a look at the news from today, and that is one news. Colton Dach out for the rest of the tournament. And if you remember back to last tournament, where his brother Kirby played in the pre-tournament game against Russia, he hurt his shoulder, dislocated his shoulder. Colton Dach out with the exact same thing, a messed up arm. So unfortunate for the Dach family, just not necessarily having the best of luck in this tournament. So hopefully they can get better. Hopefully they both can play someday with Chicago. and obviously with Doc now on Montreal, hopefully they can be reunited, play together once again. But at the end of the day, if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. If you'd like to drop a like, if you realize it, consider subscribing. Tell all your friends and comment down below your thoughts on Day 6 of the World Junior Championship. Until next time.